All right. Hey, okay. Just want to. Sounds like some audio issues potentially. So, can somebody confirm to me in the chat that audio is coming in? As long as they can hear me. It sounds like some people could hear the music. It was just a little bit quieter. So, if anybody can give me a thumbs up in the live chat. Okay, good. Perfect. Audio is clear. Everybody, thanks for coming in today. This will be actually the first time that I both am doing a live stream on YouTube with the Power BI Days Northwest that I'll go into in a minute, but also reconfiguration of my setup and everything to basically do a solo stream of myself giving a presentation. So again, let me know. I'll be monitoring the chats and kind of multitasking as both the moderator and the presenter itself. But otherwise, I think everything should go through smoothly, and I'll be monitoring, the chats and all that, and Greg will be in here to help us out. But let me actually switch over to kind of a couple of slides and talk about exactly what's going to be going on today, and the fact that I mentioned this is kind of a part two of Power BI Days Northwest. So I'm going to go ahead and do that over here. Let's see. Give me one, two. And see, always fun with technical issues. So 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. I need to make sure I'm getting to the right one. Cut to that. There we go. And pop this up. Now, in theory, okay, I should be able to then monitor the chat and everything else. So cool. Looks like this is running as it should be. So yeah, this is day two of Power BI Days Northwest. Greg over, who's going to be helping moderate today, he's sitting in the chat window and will be helping to kind of answer questions and everything as they come up. And we are doing this as kind of our second iteration of Power BI Days Northwest. So this is something that we put on last year. It's in collaboration with Jan Molkens, who's over in Europe, kind of as a community-based conference that goes on around the world in various different cities. We had a lot of success. I think it was last May or June when we put this on, and people seemed to really like it and want to do a second one. So we decided to kind of do another one this year. The first day was done on Teams yesterday. That will actually be up on the CSGPro's website here in a couple of weeks. And Greg, of course, when you get those links, I will throw them in the description here as well to kind of cross promote. But we had two great presentations yesterday on all things Power BI. And a couple of more that are going to be going on today, both myself and then in about an hour, Ansh is going to come on, another presenter that I'm helping stand up, going to talk about some really cool things related to SharePoint and some integrations from there. But I would encourage you, please to tweet and reshare this on social media as much as you can. It really helps to promote both Power BI Days itself and this specific stream and the Northwest edition of it. So it's very good to kind of just help pass the message along as well. And overall for today's agenda, we're going to be going over two presentations. It's going to be the first one, which will be done by me. It's a revision of a talk that I love to do about visualization magic in the age of numbers and science. Some really cool tips and tricks regarding visuals and report design and everything else. And then, like I mentioned later on at about 5 o'clock my time tonight, Pacific Standard Time, we'll have Ansh presenting on must-know ways to integrate Power BI with SharePoint. And as I mentioned, there was a prior day. Yesterday, Brian Grant had talked about a lot of things related to introduction to DAX and time intelligence. And then Ben and Ahmed also presented on really great ways to improve upon the data model design and structure. And Greg, you can remind me, I believe that should be going on your CSGPro YouTube channel in about 2 weeks or so. And again, once those links have come out, those will be available in the description of either of these videos from today. With these videos that you're watching now, these will be immediately available on YouTube live stream just because the way they get saved, so you'll be able to come back and watch these later. And for my presentation, again, since I'm kind of wearing the dual hat role, at least for mine, I'll be doing a mix of presenting, and then I'll have certain spots where I'm stopped, and I'll kind of go through and ask any questions in there. I will ask just to help me track a little bit better so I can kind of scan through. Anytime you have a question directed at me, just make sure that there's a cue at the beginning of it, and that will help me kind of know what to scan through, because that's what I'll be looking for as I answer questions as I go through these things. It looks like, Don, you're saying the audio is cutting in and out. At least on the feed that I'm watching, it seems to be pretty consistent, but there's one thing I will tweak just in case. Sometimes I know noise canceling, if I move my mouth away from the mic that's over here, has a tendency to cut it out. So, okay, there you go. All right, but other than that, I think, yep, everybody can see the presentation, me in the right corner. So let's go ahead and get into what the presentation today is going to be. So this is one of my favorite talks that I like to give, and it's something that's never going to go away because it's, you know, I love the analogy of the everlasting gobstopper, which is it's something that every time you eat it, it just changes its flavor. This is kind of my version of a gobstopper as a presentation because I do YouTube videos, now multiple times a week and uh, both on live streams and just cool things that I find out. And each time I kind of, I don't know, come up with a new way to make a visual or just something fun and unique that I've figured out a way to build in Power BI. I usually swap those things out into this presentation. So it's constantly a grab bag of really cool and new techniques. So, in 12 months, a good probably 60-70% of this presentation will be new. There's a few mainstays in here that I've kept for a long time because I think they're important to talk about, but there's it's just one of those things that just continues to evolve as I find more fun ways to utilize Power BI. I'll go to here. So I'm going to guess the majority of you, because obviously we're now in a my YouTube live stream versus standard user group, are probably familiar with me, but those who aren't, I've been doing this stuff now for, and by stuff I mean business intelligence, for about eight years. I've technically owned my own company for the last 7, though I would say I've only actually worked full time for it with my own clients for about the last 3. It's been a nice, wonderful growth, and a lot of the stuff I would say that's both contributed to me getting an MVP, and other stuff has been community contributions, blogs, videos like this, and I've really found kind of a niche specialty for me. It really has focused on design and aesthetics because I've seen that there's a substantial amount of reports out there, often with good data models and good data, but just many things about it might not necessarily be aesthetically pleasing, that the right visuals aren't being used. So I just found that was an easy specialty to fall on because I've just seen so many people seeking out that kind of information and expertise that you know people don't always have at the same time. You're usually more left-brained or right-brained, coding versus artistic, and it's sometimes kind of hard to mesh the two together within a single individual. And that's kind of where I would say most of um, my specialty that I've chosen to focus on has I've decided to put the effort into over the last few years. All right. So given this talk, if I actually had about 90 minutes, these are everything that I would normally cover in there. Considering that we'll probably have 50 minutes or so, because I will have a hard stop at 45, just FYI, at 4:45 Pacific Standard Time, because I'll have about a 15-minute buffer to hop out of here, switch my configuration in my streaming tool, and then bring my other presenter on. So that this will be kind of a fun building the train track as it rolls day today. So we'll see how that goes. But I'll probably get through about 60% of the topics that are on here. More than likely either getting into about card layering and tooltips or matrix table heat map, and other videos, other topics in here that I may not have a full amount of time to present on. I'll also have supplemental videos to reference you later to watch some additional ones as well. So with that, I'm actually just going to flip out of my presentation here. I'm going to switch over to first topic of the day, and as I'm doing that now, let me just quickly scan through, see if there's any quick questions in here. Alex, thanks for tuning in. And cool, yeah, nothing stands out at the moment. So again, feel free to ask the questions in there, and then what I'll do is probably every 5-10 minutes, I'll just monitoring kind of off on my second monitor if there's any questions related to stuff. But I'll pause at the end of each demo just to see if there's any current questions in there. So this is actually one of the presentations that I've done, demos that I've done, that's actually been in this talk since day 1, and it still hasn't gone away, and I'll mention a couple reasons why. I actually did a really cool video to use this conditional formatting dots that you see here to actually make some KPI bands that was in last week's video. So if you check out my channel, you'll actually see some interesting other things that I've done with this. But what you have is conditional formatting applied to a line chart. Again, I've been presenting on this for 2 years, and the reason is because this isn't something you can find easily to access to turn on. I almost like to describe this as like failed successfully, because with Power BI, one thing that you have is the ability to start with one visual and convert to another one. So the line chart itself, if you come over here, you go to the format pane and go down to data colors, you notice a couple things missing. There is no little f of x button in here that allows you to apply some type of measure-based formatting. That just doesn't exist into there. However, we still see that there is some kind of a KPI dot that's showing up and allows you to put it onto there. And I wasn't planning on doing this. I kind of stumbled across it on accident because there's some, with any of us, there's a lot of ways we shortcut stuff in Power BI just to save ourselves time. And this visual already has background color, titling, a lot of formatting that I've already reapplied. And whether or not I copy and paste visuals or maybe use custom theme files, I want to, reuse my saved information and formatting as much as possible. So at the time I was developing this, I copied and pasted a visual to a new one and then I reconfigured it. But I had started from one of these and it happened to have already had, you see over here, conditional formatting applied to it. And when it converted, it took it with it. The formatting is not as important. If I show you the formatting up into here, I need to figure out a way to get that NVIDIA thing to stop like popping up. It's Power BI is not a game. I don't need to configure my computer to like optimize Power BI for a gaming experience. But it's just standard bottom, middle, and top percentages in there. Really just indicating some color that's going to that's going to format the bars. And when I convert it to a line chart, it brings those through. And this is one of those ones where it is good to pause for a moment and see that if you want, Greg having fun in the chat, if you actually want to deploy this to production. And the reason I'm mentioning this is if you ever hit a scenario where you have to kind of wait or stop and think and ask yourself, is this a bug or a feature? Then that's probably a good moment to actually check online to see if has anybody else come across this. And the reasons I'm mentioning this is you don't want to deploy something that might disappear in a patch in 2 months. And this is kind of one of those scenarios where, okay, the first thought is just if I can have conditional formatting on a line chart, why do they not just give me an option to apply that here? It's cool that it got applied from a column chart to a line chart, but I'm hesitant to deploy this because I don't want a customer to come to depend on this or expect it and then have them come away and just basically lose this and somewhat of the reliability that they have for both Power BI and potentially me as a consultant might disappear. So overall, this is something that I actually checked online. I saw a few other people blog about this, and I sent an email to Microsoft. One advantage of being an MVP is that at least I get some channels of communication with the development team, and they told me this was not something that they would patch to have it go away. My goal at some point in the future is I would love them to add a button that would have this turned on automatically so it's easier for people to find. With many of these little hacks and tricks that I present on, I would love it to become simple enough that I don't have to have this as a demo because that means it's easy enough for people to find that I don't have to do a demonstration on it. It's one of the reasons that this is 2 years in, I still present on this because it's kind of a hidden feature in the sense that it's not just readily apparent. A couple of downsides with it is we've now discussed it's reliable and some reasons you might want to check before potentially deploying something that could be a bug rather than a feature. The couple of limitations that you have related to this is the fact that the dots can't be changed. So I cannot customize these to a diamond, a triangle, a square. The shapes cannot be moved. I cannot set the size of the dots as well. They scale with the visual. They don't actually change as it gets smaller, but I cannot independently increase or decrease them as a size. The only thing I have control over is whether or not they are visible or not. One thing I actually did do, just to mention this as a brief segue, I'll actually just show you the file, and I'll go a little off script on this and just show you what the adjustable bands look like in here. I won't go into the demo of this. It'll be a soft encouragement for me to go watch the video because views do help my channel a little bit. But I want to show you what I took from this and how I modified that. Because I saw a couple other people create the KPI dots on here, but only have them show up when they're above or below a certain threshold. So after a few iterations and figuring out how I can continually do things better, more and more, I eventually made something that looked like this. So I have my low and high range. I can set a range. Basically like highlight my top 20 and my top 30. So if I increase my low range to 34%, notice that I have a band in the back that pops up that shows you the range for my lowest percent bucket that I want, and sorry, my band, and then the highest one as well. So I have two ranges that I could adjust where they are. The middle range stays unformatted, but the upper and lower bounds basically can highlight either like wherever your percentage ranges you want to consider for good or low. I started just with simply having this in here where I just showed the dots. Like, all right, well, see that conversation, I've made this, but how can I make this better? How can I make it clear? Because it's not always apparent where that line is drawn. So then I figured out a way to add a line, a static line in between those to a reference line to create those buckets. And then, all right, well, one further step, how do I color it in? So with, by the time I got to my third iteration, this is what I basically came up with. Again, there's a lot of steps to this, so I will, for this one, I'll defer you to my latest video that's just on my channel. If you go to the video feed, it's the most current one posted outside of today. That will walk you through that. But as you can see, I can not only just show the color ranges like that I was having here, you can also do a lot more things with a line chart and conditional formatting to come up with some really fun ways to create high and low values in there. All right, just checking to see if there's any questions in the chat yet. Nope, just some conversation, so that's good. And a couple of other things that I'll mention onto here. I will keep going with a few others, but if you have any questions outside of how I made the other one, which again, I'll just defer you to the other video that I have. If you have any questions on use cases or applicability or anything about the adding those conditional formatting dots onto this, feel free to drop that into the chat. But one other thing that I really like that Power BI came out with now almost 2 years ago, it feels like time flies, but one of my favorite features in Power BI is the ability when they finally added visual header tooltips to visuals. There was a way to kind of do this, and I used to do this years ago with bookmarks, where you put an image onto the page, something similar to this, where there's a little like helper icon, and then they click it and it pops up, a window with a text box that was created by a bookmark. But the problem is you have 10 visuals on your page. That can eventually become a lot of bookmarks and individual things that have to be configured. And that's a ton of work to create helper text all over the page. So when they built that in, or baked it in right out of the box, that was one of my favorite features to come out because it's a great way to just add informative text. Now there's a couple of workarounds, enhancements that I did to this, again, because there's a couple of limitations, and anytime I'm given a limitation, I try to figure out what can I do to get around it, and improve upon it. So first thing that I'll mention, and one of the reasons that I like to bring this up, is the way they've built the access to this is very unintuitive in my case. So I'm going to come down to here and notice that I have a menu for Visual Header Tooltip. I like this. I think it's a useful feature. I also think that considering everything else in here has an on and off switch, why do they not just have a toggle right here, radio toggle, to turn this on and off? So that's the thing that kind of bothers me to the extent that it's the way to get this to show up is you have to come down, open up Visual Header. But I do see that Fernando mentioned that the text is a little off, so I'm not sure what you mean specifically by text or not, but if you can elaborate in the chat, I'll take a look in here in a minute. You have to come down, all the way down here, and there's a toggle in another menu to turn on the Visual Header Tooltip. Now, I don't know about you, but how often do you go through every menu and scroll to the bottom of them? Like that, I would imagine not a lot of people would do that if it's not knowing. Okay. It is buffering a bit. Let's see. All right. Are you at least at the moment still able to hear me and audio and video? Greg I just see the comment from Greg that's saying it's buffering a bit. Okay, fuzzy but legible. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I noticed that it is saying the bit rate is a little bit low, so it might also just be my zoom it tool. Okay, it might just be the zoom it tool that's doing that. Sometimes it when it scales down, it's not quite as clear. So, but either way, Visual Header Tooltip is yeah. Again, it's I love the feature that's implemented, but I don't always feel it's designed in a way that's easily accessible to users. So this is one of the reasons that I pointed out is really just everything else is built in a different way, and it's frustrating that that is such a hidden feature. I think more people these days know about it than not, but it's still one of those, I would never have even known to look for it if I didn't read the blog update, because it's such a buried item. You turn that on, then the visual header shows up. So one of the reasons that I demo this. But another limitation that, again, I like to provide a workout is I'm going to go to none. And by default, tooltip text here simply only allows up to 250 characters. And sometimes you might want to include more than that. So when I'm just simply doing standard text, it would get something that looks like this. Zoom back in. Yeah, and I know it's a little fuzzy on my screen as well, but I think that's just the scaling with the free zoom it tool. This is all you can get, and with the standard visual header tooltip text, you are limited in the fact that you cannot, how would you call it? You have no rich text formatting. So that includes the ability to bold, underline, italicize, add anything else, indents, etc. It's just simply going to write a line and then give you a 250 character limit. If you want to get around that, the thing that I've found that's useful is you can create a report tooltip page to attach to this. So instead, I have a hidden page called information tooltip that is down here. There we go. And same thing, all this is a report tooltip page, and that's pretty simple to set up. The page itself to be assigned as a tooltip to a visual, either at the visual header level or in the visual itself. You just have to make sure that the page information has been tooltip turned on, and page size is set to tooltip. Other than that, that's really all you need to do, and then you need to customize it itself. So in here, what we have is a text box that's just put onto the page, and that is just formatted to the same color as the standard tooltip background. And at this point now, I could actually, because it's a text box, I can bold, I can underline, like I can do anything I want to as far as the formatting goes in here, and I have full freedom to be able to customize this and make it as tall or as wide as I possibly need to. So more options when it comes to just design in this sense, if you need it. The one downside is, you have some hidden pages in your report, but overall, that's not that big of a deal generally. It doesn't actually add that much performance hit to your file, and once you've built them, they're basically done. I've tried a couple of ways to figure out if I can create one page that can dynamically change the text across visuals, but one of the downsides is you would have to kind of build some fancy filtering and some other stuff. So it's possible, but honestly, it's a lot less work just to build out a bunch of hidden pages for when you need them and assign them in there. So two of my biggest things that I just wanted to show on this really is just the ability to add those conditional formatting dots onto the line, and some additional ways to configure the visual header tooltip, and even the fact that it exists. So those are the two primary ones for my first demo. I'll get in and check down here and see if anybody has any questions. Okay. And yeah, it looks like Greg's saying that, yeah, it should be streaming at 1080 if it gives you the option to do that. Let me quickly check myself. I know it auto scales sometimes on my machine up on the upload, but I do. Yeah, okay. So yeah, the max quality is 1080. So if it happens to be a little extra fuzzy, just make sure you've selected 1080p in the output. But again, I think one of the bigger reasons is, again, the zoom it tool on these machines starts to make things fuzzier when you zoom in just a little bit. All right, cool. So finished with demo one. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to open my second one. Now, this was one of those ones that it's back November, I think I made this, but there's with almost anything that I make, and I'll give you a bit of backstory onto why I built this way, and just a broader concept on images and custom visuals in Power BI files. In general, I try to import as few things as possible when it comes to objects or visuals that are not already included in Power BI for a couple of reasons. If you start adding images, then you're really going to, it adds a little bit of file size. The performance isn't that much, but if you add a 5 megabyte image into your report, it's going to save a close to full-size version of that image in the file itself and reference it. So you can start to add a bit of file bloat. Granted, if you're working on an enterprise model that's 800 megabytes, just because it has to be that big, adding 20 megabytes with images isn't going to hurt that much. But still, you don't want to add any unnecessary size. Same thing goes with custom visuals that I'll review again later. I try to use native visuals as much as possible. So my approach is always, can I do this out of the box? If not, what options do I have to explore to make this thing that I need for a business requirement? And this is an example that I have in here where a client, wanted a kind of a radio toggle back and forth. Like think of what you see on your iPhones or anything else like that. And ended up building basically this, where I have a little radio toggle. And again, the information below it doesn't matter. It's basically toggling between, perspective A and B. In this case, I used a chart to switch the visibility of as the example. But the goal of this isn't really what the bookmark is or what it's toggling. It's to show you how to make this button itself, which I didn't actually think I could make this natively. I was going to originally explore an option where I could create 3 images, a image that looks like this, one that looks like this, and another one that looks like the left aligned one. So you can actually assign images to buttons, and there is a way to import them after you built them in Photoshop or PowerPoint. But again, you have to make those. You sometimes have to worry about scaling and seeing if it's going to be fuzzy or not, depending on the user's resolution, users' resolution of the monitor they're consuming this on. So there's some other factors to come into play, and whether or not you even have like a tool to make these in editors, and also size and width and many considerations to have with custom images. So I really wanted to know, can I make this out of the box? So what I actually have in here, if I come over to this, is I have two buttons. Basically, when I activate that bookmark, I am toggling not only the visual below it, but I'm toggling the visibility of these two buttons that are on top of each other. So I, basically activate it. It slides over. This button hides. This one becomes visible. So it looks like it is moving across and then moving back when I activate it the other way. The button itself, let's go ahead and zoom out. I'm going to need to unlock my objects. Let's copy. Here we go. And get that so you can see it a little bit better over here. Here we go. So a couple of things that I've done on this. So the button text, and with any button that you have in Power BI, you have a couple of primary states that gives it a interactability, if that's a word, showing people that things can happen when you click it. So the first thing that's to me important to do is to be able to show a user when they hover over it, something's changing. And that is the on hover state. You have the default, which what does it look like on the page? On hover, what does it look like when a mouse is hovering over it or a finger taps it in Power BI Mobile? On press is what happens when you click on it. So 3 different states to configure. Now what I did on here is I was trying to create a slider toggle button that's in the middle of this. So this is actually something I grabbed as an emoji icon. One thing you can actually do, and this doesn't work at scale when I'm zoomed in, but if you press the Windows key and semicolon, you get an emoji keyboard. And if I look for circle, there we go. See if yeah, like I said, it doesn't really zoom in well, but you notice that there's a bunch of circles to fetch basically from the emoji library that's on Windows. So I grabbed the white circle and I put that in here. Now the reason it goes right, middle, and left is because I have chosen to have 3 different alignments. Notice that this is changing at the bottom. Default state is on the right, on hover is in the middle, on press is on the left. So that's how I get 1, 2, and 3. So it has the kind of motion of moving over and moving back when you do that. So it's kind of as step 1, it's successfully moving. And I had a little bit of things where I had to mess with the size and the scaling, and because I wanted to make sure it was centered and a few other stuff. So because if you go too big, as an example, if it actually, oh, interesting. It's scaling. Oh, here we go. There you go. Yeah, it's like it starts to get cut off. So there's a little bit of tweaking and formatting you have to do just to get the alignment and everything just right. But in general, once you have it set and done, it's in the right place and it creates that nice motion effect that you're looking for. Similarly, the other thing that I did with the outline is I actually included some rounded edges. Most of the radio buttons that you see as icon packs or anything else, they're not squares. They don't look like this. They generally look like a rounded little toggle that you'd see on a phone or old school hardware devices. So thankfully, the outline in here can have a rounded edge. And that, if I can, all right. And see, one of those small gripes that I have, like it doesn't actually, at 0 it was getting grumpy to let me, there we go, actually select the 0 and type over it. But with these now, we have a smooth edge that goes around it, and again, it's mirroring the effect of what a radio button would look like. So I've accomplished step 2 of that. The thing here that's important is notice that I'm kind of going to a neutral color. I started with color A. Gray is I just picked something that was inert between the two, and then purple is the one on the right. So that's simply what I did with these 3 different states, is I just changed the colors in each of those. And same thing with the fill color. So default, on hover, and on press follows that same mirroring. So for both of these, the only difference is I'm having one starting on the right, one starting on the left, but they're mirrored other than the fact that they basically are just going in the opposite direction of the 2 of them. So with those then layered on top of each other and activating some bookmark with the visibility toggle happening, that is essentially how we can get, using just the native visual in Power BI, this little nice toggle back and forth. There's a couple of small things that annoy me is even after you select it, as long as you're hovering over it, it's not actually going to stick to the right side because the on hover state has that middle action. So I prefer to keep it in there because most of the time they're going to click it and immediately move their mouse away. So it's a very small kind of artifact that shows up. So it's not 100% perfect. Where like CSS, you could you can make everything absolutely perfect with scripting, but this is darn close to the effect of like a web page toggle that you would get within the limitations of what's available in Power BI. A couple of other things that I will mention as a just a little few notes, especially when you're using emojis in here, and this is an important one, is you want to make sure that you are aware of what devices these reports are being consumed on. Because when you add a rich text emoji, so like any of these, in general, just see if I can bring up another one. Any of these things, the ones that actually have colors and formatting and everything else, an actual emoji, each computer, better said, each operating system has a different library for these. Windows has their own, which is what you've just seen. Apple has very similar ones, but let's do an example like the smiley faces. The smiley faces for Apple look a little bit different than the smiley face for Windows, which looks different than the smiley faces for Android. So they all have slightly different looks and feels. Microsoft is more of the flat affect. Apple has a few of the shadows and a bit more 3D of an effect in some of them. But just know that it's not always going to look exactly the same. So if somebody's really picky about design and aesthetic and they want this exact one, and they're opening it on a different operating system, maybe on a MacBook that they're looking at, the symbol will change ever so slightly. So just make sure that you are aware of that and you do some testing instead. You can also just put in a standard like ASCII dot, just a black one, but that white one is technically rich, is an emoji, which is why it has the outline and everything else. So on Windows devices, it looks fine, but it will change ever so slightly to a somewhat of a different looking dot, maybe with different shading on other devices. So one little gotcha just to be aware of if you end up deploying something like this. All right. I'm liking the numbers, 73 people so far. This is great. So what I'll do is, again, if there's any questions, you're welcome to drop that down into the chat. Otherwise, I will go to the next one. And there is one question that I did see from Ron. So let me actually pop that up. So there we go. I have the power. Can you show the values as dots? Just again, as a reminder to people in the chat, if you do have a question, just make sure there's a Q at the beginning of it to help out. But and I might actually ask you to elaborate on that. I know it's from the previous demo, Ron, but I'm not entirely sure the context of that because we do have the dots are already on there. So yeah, just follow up with that, and I'll probably answer it one more time at the end. All right, cool. So let me go ahead and exit out of this and switch to my next demo. Save. Another fan favorite of mine. Okay. So I did have. Okay. So if it is numbers at the dots, then you cannot add data labels to those specifically. They're with any kind of conditional formatting like that. In general, what the formatting is can't really have any kind of data label to it. The only things that can have labels are the line itself, if that is the question. All right. Pop that back out. All right. So this one was one of my favorites that I made last fall. I came out around the same time that we had a new feature called Smart Narrative Tooltip. Took me a minute to remember that. That's the thing that you see at the top. So the Smart Narrative Tooltip allows you to basically add measures from your model that can be dynamically filtered into a text box. It's a kind of a hybrid rich text, natural language text that can be fused together with data that can update based on filter context. So you can see me hovering here as I change to different filters. You'll notice that the numbers are changing to different values. And again, if it's a little fuzzy, I apologize. But the values you can see change from 54,000 to 51, etc. So I have dynamic values changing in here based off of a measure that is in this text box being supplied from the model. And just like any other tooltip, it is taking the filter that is coming from this visual and applying it to all the visuals that are on that report tooltip page. In this case, I have 3 actual visuals that are on here. I created kind of a title, information bar at the top. I created a text box in the middle, and I, just for kind of funsies, I added a custom visual at the bottom to give some additional context and perspective to the data that we're seeing. What I actually did here is I wanted this a part versus total, kind of as a subtotal just to see the size of it. So this blue line that you see here is whatever I'm hovering over. So let's just assume that at the moment I'm hovering over this, and it looks like class is regular. So that's the blue bar. At any point, I want to kind of have a comparison of it. It's simply just showing me what is this value compared to the total value for this all three of these added together, and that's what the green lines are. So it's basically a grand total on top of the inside of one. And yeah, the stack column gives some perspective, but I think it gives a little bit of a better comparison when they're overlaid directly on top of each other. So you can really see if it's half or not versus when they're stacked on top of each other, which I don't think provides quite as clear of a part to whole comparison as like a bullet chart or something else would. So I really like just to add that in kind of as a, honestly, just something to fill it out, but it ended up becoming a second part of a video that I did just because of how much I ended up liking that. But you can see, even if you hover over here, it just gives you such a better perspective of how small this subtotal is versus the entire bar itself. All right, so I'm going to walk you through each one of these. Done. Here we go. Checking for time. Cool. I'm just going to start from the top to the bottom. I'll get to the sweet stuff at the very end. And yeah, actually, Kirill, to your point, bullet charts are pretty fantastic. One of the reasons that I like to use them is they are a great example of when a custom visual actually is useful in a Power BI report. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective. So I'll pause and actually just talk about that for 1 minute, just to give you reasons of why you may want to use custom visuals, but also just some considerations when you are. So custom visuals are useful when you need them. If you cannot accomplish your goal, and there is no bullet chart visual in Power BI that you can make without some interesting layering or using Charticulator, which already is a custom visual to begin with. And the reason that I mentioned like a little bit of caution is, I've come across people who build out entire report pages where everything on the report page is a custom visual, every single thing, and they want to know why the report is slow. The problem with that, and I'll even just I'll just go to a full screen here for a moment while I talk. The problem if you do that is because that custom visuals load a little bit slower than native visuals in Power BI, as they are being brought in for security reasons, because custom visuals are not made by Power BI. Better said, they're not made by Microsoft. So they do get certified and vetted, but native visuals, when they load in browser, they have the ability to access shared resources. So resources used to load the title or the legend or anything else that can be shared as part of the libraries across native visuals, they can rely upon those to help speed up loading onto the page when you're rendering it in a browser. Custom visuals don't have that luxury because they want to make sure that no data is leaked and they want it to be clean and secure. So they will load a little bit slower than native visuals because of that. There's just an extra security layer to make sure that no data leakage happens and they can't access shared libraries because of that. They've done a lot of improvements in the last 12 months to speed that up, but they will never be as fast as the native visual. They'll always be a little bit slower. So they're very useful to use when necessary, but don't go building entire reports out of nothing but like 30 custom visuals on the page. You're going to hit a point where it doesn't matter how fast your data model is. When you hit load in a browser, browsers are single threaded. They load one object at a time, not in parallel. It's going to run a little bit slower, and you might end up with a page that takes 5 to 7+ seconds to load because you have all these custom visuals that are having to island by island load their own libraries from scratch every time. So it's just a little bit of a double-edged sword that I just want to mention. Again, I fully support and love custom visuals, but I use them sparingly only when I need to, not just all the time. I do notice a couple questions, so let me take a look at them and see if anything I can answer. So give me 1 sec. Interesting. So let me pop this one up. So John, you had a question about it always seems that Power BI pages of visualizations created by others seems to fit a lot more than when I try to do something similar. Yeah, so I'm going to guess is what you're saying is it seems to be that I'm going to paraphrase and say that you think that people's visualizations or maybe the resolution of the report page seems to be different, larger or something else to allow them to fit more. There are times where people will change the native resolution to something else. It's kind of a default of 16 by 9, and then they'll scale that up to make it like 2K or 3K resolution. But the problem is yes, you can technically modify the resolution of the page to make it bigger. But the problem is you make it bigger, what happens to the visuals? They get smaller. So yeah, it's not far removed from just increasing the font size of titles and other stuff. I usually don't recommend that because if you're getting to the point where you're having to smash so many things onto the page that you can't even fit it onto the native scale, then you might want to consider making a page 2 or 3 or anything else, just because it can start to get really busy and then you lose some of the meaning behind it. I'll see if I can answer any other ones that are relevant to what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I'll go back to the demo. So Jacob and Eric, yeah. If I will say then, just for Greg, if you want to ping them towards the end, just ask, remind them to ask that again. Actually, no, better said, I'm just going to add these to my queue because I have the ability. So I'm going to add you two to my queue, and then I will address those at the very end of the presentation. Okay, so for this here, I'm just going to, for sake of time, I'm actually going to skip the custom visual to show how that was put into there. It really is just two simple calculations, so I'll briefly cover this. But the visual that I'm using is the bullet chart by OKViz. They're a fantastic company. They're supported by Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari, and they make a lot of really great out-of-the-box custom visuals that are free. And I basically just have a standard DAX calculation and then one that ignores the filter, allowing me to get the grand total. That's what's in there. But the goal of this is going to be talking about the text boxes, so that's what I'm going to focus on here. I will just mention the title. This is actually a really interesting solution for using buttons for something that is not a button. This is actually a button that I added onto the page. One of the reasons that I love buttons, more even oftentimes than single value cards, is for a couple of good reasons. One of the primary ones that I like is, and it still blows my mind, why is this not a feature on single value cards? I have alignment for top, middle, and bottom. You notice that it's changing when I select that. I still don't understand why they don't have that on a single value card. Why can't I choose the alignment? It's always in the center. I would love to be able to pick anywhere in the card where to put my text. It's not an option. So one benefit from that is the ability to choose those. So it's one of the primary reasons that I often use buttons as a visual in many different presentations that I do. And thank you. I was just mentioning that I need to share my screen. Cut. Here we go. So I'll just quickly recap that. So the button that we have in front of us here, and I'm going to take off the question. Multitasking. With this, for the title that they have at the top, it is a button that I placed onto the page with the DAX measure supplying the data. And again, single value cards do not have this option for alignment. So someday, fingers crossed, they add this in. But in general, there's going to be an issue where I'm hoping that they eventually update this. But until then, I really, really like buttons to be able to provide the additional formatting that certain basic visuals do not have. So that's primarily why I use it here. And then with a lot of things in Power BI, I can use a measure to supply the data that's coming into here. Instead of just standard text that I type in, I instead can put a measure that's outputting some kind of a text output. So that's all I did in here is I created a measure that returned a string of text kind of formatted, and that's what's being supplied within this field. So I'll quickly show the calculation in here. Let's look for title. And actually, for this one, I'm not even going to zoom in. This will probably be clearer for you if I just do this. There we go. Make that nice and big. All right. All I've done is written out brand with a space. I used a max function, and this doesn't matter if it was max, min, first, or last, because by the time this page is having filter context being passed through from the visual that I'm hovering over to get the data, there's only ever going to be one brand name or ever going to be one class name. So again, I could have put min for both of these. Either way, it's fetching using that function, first or last or min or max from that column. And that translates over here on the report page to any of the context that you see when you hover. So brand AdventureWorks, class economy. I added that later on because I wanted to really make sure that you were very aware of whatever the filter was being applied to this. So if you take a screenshot or just so they don't, just so there's no ambiguity around what data they're currently looking at, what cut of the data, so to speak. So that's the title. And then obviously the last thing that I want to present here is the wonderful, wonderful smart narrative visual. Basically just, I like to think of it as the enhanced text box. It can be added very easily just by, all you have to do is go up to insert, you add any text box to the page, you're going to get this new ribbon here that will have formatting ribbon, I guess, that has all of the controls, standard for links, everything else that's been around. But now it has these new sections down here for value and review. Now with anything like this that I present on, I have my soapbox moment to talk about something for 30 seconds or so, maybe probably more realistically a few minutes with each one. But this is another one that I love the feature. I don't like how it was implemented. As a developer, I don't want to use Q&A to put a value in. The only way to add a measure into here, and you notice when I clicked value, it has a spot that it's going to put the measure in, and then that will be filtering and generating numbers with the filter context. But you have to use Q&A to get it. Like Q&A is great. Q&A is a user feature. It is something that users, when they are consuming the report, want to use. It is not something as a developer. I don't want to have to type out a question in here to get my data. I want a drag and drop option where I can just go over to whatever measure I have, and I just want to be able to, add it to a well and then have that, placed into my text box. So my one small gripe is that I have to actually search for it, and sometimes Q&A doesn't always work perfectly to find the measure name or anything else, but that's essentially how they get added. So I'll go through an example of adding one into here. I'm going to get rid of this 52. Total sales month. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to get rid of this number. There we are. And I'm going to add a new number right there. Come on. There we go. So add. And if I type in total sales, Q&A does pop that up. I will say that, I'll play the devil's advocate on the other side of the fence now. The one nice thing about Q&A is I can say total sales in this month, which allows me to actually apply a date filter from the calendar table for current month onto this. This is not a measure that exists in my model, but I have the option to put that into the visual. So it's generating a version of the measure for me with additional filters. So if I click that, and actually, let me just first show you the filtering that's happening. So total sales, there we go. You can see the number down there. Total sales in this month. Month. If I can spell, there you go. The number shrinks. So you can see it does actually change with time, and it even gives me an option to add custom formatting if I want to put into there. And that's all that I did with each of these. All of these that are harvested are measures that are already built. Percentage of grand total was something that I created as a DAX measure. Same with my sales growth values. And I added a couple of emojis in here just to spice up the text a little bit and break up the monotony of just black text. A couple of other practices that I do. Let's see if I can get that to show back up now. There we go. Okay. Another thing that I've found that's helpful is anytime I have a metric that is dynamic, I will underline it, because these metrics only are fetching data from the model, just like any other text that is in this text box. You can underline, bold, italicize, anything you want. So I just like ways to call out, this is something that will change in the model when you're getting your tooltip text and hovering over it. So in the next iteration, I do hope they make it a bit easier just to add measures without having to use Q&A. But that's essentially the process to do that. And then you can create this nice little natural language script that basically just spells out what's going on and just discusses the data a bit that might be a little bit easier to understand than maybe a visual or something else. I do see that there's a bit of chatter in the chat window here, so give me a second to take a look, and I'll see if there's any that are relevant to this. What type of measure? Okay, so here's a good question from Jacob, so I'll pop that up. So Jacob, you have a question of when you type in a measure column name exactly and it still doesn't show up, any suggestions? Now, I will say so far, I've not ever put a column into here. Generally, I would just recommend as a practice for Q&A is you usually want to call upon a measure that's already doing the calculation, because if you put a column in, it's going to be a first or a last or something else, and I would just say just have a measure that does that for you in the first place. I have seen that with some longer measure names, it doesn't always find it. I've not had an issue where I've typed it in perfectly and it hasn't shown up, but the way that I've at least solved for long measure names that it has a bit of trouble finding naturally through Q&A, I will just go over to the measure. I'll just pick one. I'll just basically take, that's a glitch right now in the new version of Power BI desktop, is it auto opens all of the things in here, because I double click to want to get the measure name, and at the same time it is expanding out the list, so hopefully a bug they fix. But the thing for this demonstration that I'm trying to do is I will just take the name, I'll copy it, and I will search just the exact thing that it's spelled in there. And doing this method, at least, I've yet to experience it not finding it. MOMCL is obviously short, but again, if you have a really long name, this has been a good solution for me to find that out. All right, let's see if there is any other questions. Scroll into here. A couple from Kirill. Let's see. You don't have a created measure and ask for one via Q&A. Does it create an implicit measure? That's actually here. Let me pop that up. This is a great question as well. So if you don't have a created measure and ask for one via Q&A, does it create an implicit measure? Essentially, yes. That is what it's doing. Arguably, everything that you do in Power BI in a visual is running a DAX script. So you drop a column into a table. You have product category and you just drag sales amount into there. It is generating DAX code to sum that up for you. It's not adding a measure in your list in the model. Like Excel, implicit measures would actually get added into your model itself whenever you did that. So in the back end, yes, it is running DAX. And again, I've not actually tried it. So let's see, can I actually do like first? Yeah, so it looks like I can. So something like this, I can do first calendar quarter. That will generate a script that probably uses the first function against that, and then it would return it into this visual, into this text box here. So again, I would not recommend this as a good practice. Have that as a measure, because the problem is if you've done this here, nothing else in the model can use that. And I would say the majority of the measures that you write are normally going to get used more than once. So better practice just to have the reusable measures in a DAX table somewhere in your model. All right, where are we at for time? So we are at 38, and I do need to have a hard stop at 45. So what I will say is, if you have some other, I know I have two other questions in here that I can start talking broadly about. If you have any other questions, I think I'll spend the last 6 or 7 minutes answering those. But yeah, let me first go to my queue, get this out of the way. Let me switch back to my other view. There we go. Okay, and let's go to my queue. If I haven't answered yours yet, Eric and Jacob, I'm about to get to yours. If there's any other questions, drop them in so they can get to the end of the chat now, and I will finish up my session before the next one with those. So, good broad question. You gotta love it when you get those ones that are very open-ended. I would say that this one, I'm trying to remember which one you might be referring to. If it's the example of the report that I was just showing that has a bunch of those, most of the time for a standard report with a client, end to end, I normally estimate between absolute lowest end is normally about 30 hours, upwards of about 60. It's a lot of variability, but also projects vary a lot. But a standard like report with, let's just assume a couple of pages, that also includes gathering the requirements, setup, connection, testing the data, transforming, pulling into the model, relationships, measures, iterations through the report page, tweaks to the formatting, realizing they actually want visual A and B. I'd say somewhere between there. Of the probably hundreds of reports that I've built at this point, that's what I give most clients, and that's what I found to be the kind of the upper and lower bounds. Granted, there's exceptions to that. There's a few that have been really simple. But I will say it's very rare that I've gone under like about 25 hours, everything included. Again, as a consultant who has to get brought in, and I have to start from zero with the client organization, not knowing data and anything else. So there's probably about 5 hours just to do that. And then upper end's probably 60. Obviously, there's ones that I've had like 100 hours, but those are companies that are maybe dealing with like a billion rows of data. But I would say to your question, that's probably the ballpark that I would speculate on most of the time. I had a question from Eric that I'll pop up here as well. Let's see, do I anticipate Microsoft putting any additional significant effort into adding more standard visuals, or do you think they will rely on the community to develop custom visuals to fill voids? I mean, I think you've already, if you've been keeping up to date with some of the blog posts, I mean, we just had the small multiples just come out. So Power BI definitely will continue to add native out of the box. A couple of the reasons, obviously, or maybe less obvious, but it's that they run faster, they're more reliable. A lot of organizations have limits with security for custom visuals. They have to be certified. So there's complexities that can come in to using custom visuals. So it will always be a combination of both. I think Microsoft is also, tries to be cognizant sometimes about not wanting to step on the toes of some custom developers. I can't say that 100% of the time, but they see certain avenues and scenarios with custom visuals that are really going after niche markets that they're probably not going to deploy, just because there's not enough of a need for that for their core client base for the majority of users that they would implement that. So it's always going to be a Venn diagram of the two, but Microsoft will continue to add more and more of them. I mean, we've had all of our Q&A, our AI visuals that have gotten added recently. Just reminding myself, they are Yeah, the Q&A, key influencers, decomposition tree, smart narrative. 3 of those were just added in the last 12 months. Plus the small multiples visual, the new Azure Maps visual. That's 5 visuals we've had it added this year. So I would guess, looking into the crystal ball, we'll continue to have updates like that where they just build out more and more of that base set. All right. I can also ask any other questions if you have them. I think those are the last 2 that I saw into here. Again, if I missed it, feel free to drop it in now. Otherwise, what I'll probably do is wrap up here in just a minute, and that way I can get about that 15 minutes to be able to switch over to the next presenter. So just to be safe, I'll give it about 30 seconds, see if anybody else has a question. Otherwise, then, yeah, I will say, oh yeah, and actually let me go ahead and grab the other link for anybody, just in case they don't have that. I'll get that from YouTube right now. And that will be the link to the second presentation, because they're both going to be individual links. That way they get saved as separate videos for people to watch during replay later. So let me grab that, and then I think that will be good to wrap up. And I think, yeah, peak concurrent was 76. So that's awesome. I'm really happy that this many people have tuned in. And you guys are going to love the next presentation, by the way. It's going to be some really cool stuff that even I didn't know how to do. With pulling in data from SharePoint, also changing a bit of the M code to make it easier to access the libraries in terms of the file structure there. So some really cool stuff that we'll be going over in just a bit. But with that, let me go, and here we are. And here is the link to the next one, just in case for anybody in this one. John, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in. There will be the link to the next one. Yeah, and again, I'm basically going to go offline for about 15 minutes. I'm going to hop on with my next presenter. We're going to get this spun up, and then we'll be on that new live stream. But unless there's any other questions, I'm going to go hit my the outro button, and then I will see you in about 15. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships as well. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on social media to help pass on this awesome content and to help the channel grow. So until next time.